Hi, I'm Mr. Wahlberg, and I'm glad you're here. While the United States considered how to contain communism abroad, there was also a question on how to fight communism at home. Turn with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear, when out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of Wahlberg's A-Push. History class rides again! We have two objectives today. By the end of this class, you should be able to analyze the effects of the Cold War anti-communism effort on American politics and culture. And you should be able to discuss how accusations of spying were settled in the court system. But let's begin in Roman numeral number 3. In March of 1947, President Truman set up the Loyalty Review Board to investigate and fire any government employees who were disloyal to the U.S. government. Exactly what constituted disloyalty was never clearly defined, but the Attorney General drew up a list of 91 subversive organizations, membership in any of which were grounds for suspicion. From 1947 to 1951, the Loyalty Review Board investigated 3.2 million employees, dismissing 212. That might be a good ratio. I don't know. It seems like 3.2 million investigations for 212 firings. Maybe the 212 is important, but didn't seem like a good ratio to me. Another 2,900 people resigned because they didn't want to be investigated or they didn't want to fight the investigation as a violation of their rights. The individuals under investigation weren't allowed to see any of the evidence presented against them or even to know who had accused them of being disloyal. Subpoint B. Since 1945, the House of Representatives had a committee for investigating people of actual or supposed influence in the country for being communist. Called the House Un-American Activities Committee, it became very interested in finding communists in Hollywood. Hollywood did have a substantial number of communists, former communists and socialists. But since the Soviet Union was an ally during World War II, Hollywood studios had produced several pro-Soviet films. These things were seen as patriotic during the war, as supporting our allies in the war effort. But after 1945, when the wartime alliance had cooled, some argued that these same films proved that subversives were out spreading Soviet propaganda. HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC subpoenaed 43 witnesses from the Hollywood film industry of September of 1947. A lot of these witnesses were friendly, and they supported the accusation that communists were infiltrating the movie business. Take, for instance, Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper had said that he had turned down quite a few scripts because he thought they were tinged with communistic ideas. When asked to give specifics, Cooper couldn't name any of the films and said he couldn't remember any of the titles. Nicknamed the Hollywood 10, several witnesses refused to cooperate with HUAC altogether, saying that they believed that the hearings were unconstitutional. Because they refused to participate and cooperate with HUAC, they were sent to prison. Hollywood executives instituted a blacklist, a list of people whom, in effect, they condemned for having communist backgrounds. Approximately 500 actors and writers and producers and directors all couldn't get work in the movie business and essentially had their careers ruined. Subpoint C. In 1950, United States Senator Joseph McCarthy announced that he had a list in his hot little hands, a list of 205 communists who were working in the United States State Department, and he began investigations to oust them. He used verbal attacks and demanded loyalty oaths to go prove that they weren't communists. If this was allegations were true, I mean, the State Department is the one in charge of dealing with other countries. It could be problematic if there were communists in the American State Department. The investigations were nationally televised in 1954. McCarthy probably believed that it would boost his chances in the '56 presidential race, but the plan backfired when it, found out that he was basically just a cruel bully, or at least that's the way it appeared on camera. His trials ended in disgrace for McCarthy. He was censured by the Senate and removed from his chairmanships. After his censure, McCarthy tried to serve out his term, but his career as a major public figure was ruined. Other senators tried to avoid him. His speeches on the Senate were given to nearly empty chambers as people laughed whenever it was his turn to speak, or to conscious displays of inattention. President Eisenhower, who kind of thought that McCarthy was irritating by this point, he was finally free of McCarthy's presidential or political intimidation. He quipped to his cabinet that McCarthyism, more like McCarthy-wasm. McCarthyism today is now a term for accusing people of disloyalty or making accusations without having any evidence. Senator Joseph McCarthy died of complications related to alcoholism in May of 1957 at the age of 48. Subpoint D. As Hollywood tried to rid itself of communists, Congress decided that Truman's Loyalty Review Board didn't go enough in protecting the nation's security. In 1950, it passed a bill known as the McCarran Internal Security Bill, making it unlawful to plan any action that might lead to the establishment of a totalitarian dictatorship in the United States. Truman vetoed the McCarran bill, saying, "In a free country, we punish men for the crimes they commit, but never for the opinions they hold." Congress enacted the law overturning his veto. The McCarran-Walter Act of 1952 imposed more rigid restrictions on entry quotas into the United States. It also stiffened existing laws relating to the admission, exclusion, and deportation of dangerous aliens as defined by the McCarran Security Act. Roman numeral number 4. In 1948, a former communist spy named Whittaker Chambers accused Alger Hiss, a man who worked for the State Department in the United Nations. Whittaker Chambers accused Alger Hiss of spying for the Soviet Union. Chambers produced microfilm government documents that he claimed had been typed on Hiss's typewriter. Typewriters of the era often had distinguishing fingerprints, where certain letters wouldn't often hit the page evenly or straightly. It was normal forensic evidence. A young congressman named Richard Nixon became famous for pursuing charges against Alger Hiss, and it launched his political career. Alger Hiss claimed that he was innocent and that Chambers had forged the documents used against him. Too many years had passed for prosecutors to charge Hiss with espionage, but a jury convicted him of perjury for lying about passing documents and sent him to jail. Later, as documents became available from the Soviet Union after the fall of communism there, proved that Alger Hiss was indeed a spy. Subpoint B. In 1949, the Americans had learned that the Soviet Union had successfully tested a nuclear weapon at several years earlier than scientists thought it was possible. We knew that the Soviets were working on nuclear technology, but figured they were several years out. By successfully detonating a weapon, it basically said then they've learned probably American nuclear secrets. A British scientist admitted that he had been the go-between giving the Soviet Union's American information, and in the investigation he named Ethel and Julius Rosenberg as their go-between. Julius Rosenberg was a former U.S. Army engineer. He'd lost his job when it was found that he and Ethel were communists. These two refused to testify in the espionage case, citing that they had Fifth Amendment rights to not incriminate themselves for being communists. They claimed that they were being persecuted for being Jewish and for holding radical beliefs. Julius Rosenberg, okay, this is complicated, but Julius Rosenberg believed that he was stealing atomic secrets and that he was committing a disloyal act against the United States. Julius Rosenberg clearly deserved to be prosecuted and convicted. But, and this is also important, he didn't get a fair trial. Ethel Rosenberg, his wife, was more or less innocent, and she was not significantly involved in her husband's spying. At most, she might have known about the spying and might have typed a paper or a document here and there, but certainly nothing at the level of espionage. The United States government, though, knowing this, exaggerated the charges against her, making the case that she was actually the mastermind of the plan. Now, this was entirely untrue, and the American government knew it, but they believed that if they could do that, they could set up Ethel Rosenberg and for a position where she could be executed if found guilty. Now, capital punishment for a woman was almost entirely unheard of in the 1950s, so it would have taken a pretty serious charge to do so. The prosecution knew that Julius was a fervent communist, that the husband, Julius, was a fervent communist, and that he would take his punishment without revealing any information about his superiors or the spy network in the United States. However, the government believed that if his wife was also up for charges that could get her executed, if she was also convicted and sentenced to death, maybe the American government could convince Julius to start selling out the spy network and telling them all of the connections and giving some names and how people work together, in trade-off that Ethel would be spared from capital punishment. The thought was that they would over-accuse her as a bargaining chip against him, that he would go and defend his wife and get her spared in an effort for turning over secrets. However, they underestimated his commitment and her commitment to communism, and they didn't give up any information, even to, spare her life or to spare his life. Meanwhile, their defense attorney was secretly giving J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI the secrets of the Rosenberg defense. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were found guilty and executed. The trial was a huge mishandling of justice. They were found both guilty and framed. This question of how the United States is going to deal with communism at home, how we will figure out what our future is going to look like, how the United States will handle this uncertain future. It's a fascinating story, and I can't wait to tell you about it. Make sure you like and subscribe. God bless you.